Hi, how's it going? I'm Matt and welcome back to SuperCard. Today what I'm doing is working on my R34 GTR build, carrying on with that. Last week's video, what I did was I made some really good progress on all the kind of main internal structural parts. So if you didn't see last week's video, just go and have a quick look at that. But today what I'd like to do is work on some roof parts for the car. So it's looking a little bit too much like a convertible, and I don't think they made GTRs in convertible form. So I'll start building some roof parts today. I've got an idea of sort of how the design should work and how I think the parts for the roof will fit together in my mind. Basically, there'll be just kind of like one main kind of strip that runs up from the A pillar about here, across the B pillar and down to the C pillar at the back of the car. So one of those on each side. And then through the top, there'll be like a bunch of foam board pieces that kind of tie those two main pillar parts together somehow. And I think I can probably tie in like the A pillar piece with like a slot. I'll put a slot in this kind of bulkhead piece and a slot in the bottom of the pillar part. So they'll kind of fit together, maybe about there. So they'll fit in nice and strong. And then the foam board strip will run up and along. I'll have like maybe a double layered foam board piece about here that ties into the side part for the B pillar. And that will tie into the pillar part as it runs along the top somehow. And then as it kind of comes down towards the back of the car, I'll tie the C pillar again with slots somehow into these two structural parts that I've built into the back of the car here as the C pillar comes down. So I've got a very kind of broad idea about how I think the roof will work and how it should be constructed, but again, until you kind of start designing parts and doing test fitting, never quite sure if it's actually going to work or not. So yeah, let's load up my illustrated plans file, start drawing up the first parts, do an initial cut and see if it all starts to fit together how I imagine it will. So let's go. Right, so this is my first guess at what that big main critical roof part should look like. There's a few kind of guesses here and there, like this kind of inline here. I wasn't quite sure if it should follow kind of the inside of the weather seal strip or the outside of that, like precisely where that should be. I'm not too sure. At this stage, I'm not too worried because I can tweak and kind of change that a little bit as I kind of iterate and evolve the part and the roof design. One other issue with drawing the roof line part like this is if you look at the car front on, you can see that these roof parts actually like angle in. So what I'm going to have to do is work out some kind of compensation for the fact that I've drawn this looking straight onto the side of the car, but it's actually rolled over a little bit. I'm going to have to work out what the height of that should actually be if you imagine that standing straight up, if that makes sense. So yeah, I'll make a few more tweaks to that and then I'll probably print it out and do a first cut and we can sit it on the car and see how it looks. Good, so there's the first cut of that piece done out of foam board. So if I just hold that up to the car now, I'm thinking it will fit into a slot at the front end there, somewhere around that point, and at the back where the C pillar is, that will fit into two little slots that I need to work out the angle and position of about there, but that gives a general idea of where it will sit anyway. All right, good. So as I say, the next thing to do is to work out where the slot should be there and in these two pieces here and cut those out so that I can actually fit this on. All right, it's the next night, and what you just saw me do was in my Illustrator file, I worked out the exact position and angle, etc. of these slots, with this one here at the front and two for the rear of this pillar piece for the roof line. What I did then was I cut out a paper template from my plans file, held it up against the car, marked the position, and cut it out carefully. So yeah, now this roof line piece here is actually mounted and positioned properly on the car. And another thing that I did off camera was I actually recut this piece here. So this is my new version with like slightly refined and slightly repositioned slots just at the rear, down the back here. And I moved the initial piece, the now outdated version of this piece, just over to the other side of the car. So that's now outdated, and I've like named it so that I know that that's an older piece that's now not quite correct. But I'll just leave it on the car for now because, you know, it helps give me the overall impression of the roof being a little bit more complete than it actually is at this point. And yeah, I'll continue to refine and iterate on this piece and cut new versions, and I'll just move the older versions off the car and put them in the bin, or just kind of put them to one side so that I've always got the most current version on the car. So another thing I've just done off camera is spend a few minutes just checking a few key dimensions. So for example, I'll look up in my plans file what, say, the height from the ground line to this point here and the C-pillar should be, making sure that's correct. And another dimension that I checked was the height from the top of the chassis to the top of the B-pillar at this point right here, making sure that checks out. And a few other key points as well, just making sure the measurements all check out against what I've got in my plans file at this point. Basically, I want to make sure that this kind of foundation for the roof that I'm laying out now, I need to make sure those measurements are all as correct as possible, and the size is correct, and the spacings are all correct, and the height of all the different parts of the roof line are correct, so that as I build out all the extra shape and form and parts for the roof, I know that I'm building on a correct, solid, and accurate foundation. So yeah, so far so good. That first kind of main roof line piece is looking great. So what I might move on to now is kind of a design that I have in mind for the B-pillar piece. What I'm imagining for the B-pillar piece is kind of like a single hoop shaped piece that comes up each side of the car and across the top of the roof like that. Actually, I might make it like two pieces of foam board that kind of come up where the B-pillar should be. I might build it like a tab into the bottom, which fits into a slot in the side of each side of the car. Will come up like that, go across the top of the roof, which will set the width of the roof, the exact width of the roof that I want, which will be quite nice, and then down the other side of the car, and again attaching with a tab to a slot on the inside right here. So a little bit hard to describe, but I can see it in my mind. Let's just jump into Illustrator and start drawing the piece up, and hopefully you'll see what I mean. Okay, so there's a first attempt at that part drawn up. There's definitely a few areas, like these top kind of corner parts, where I'm really just kind of making plenty of kind of guesses, and I'm just gonna have to print it out on paper, I think, and just hold it up to the model and see how it looks and make any tweaks from there. But as a first kind of place to start, I think this should be okay. So let's print it out and do a little test on the car. Right, slight change of plans. I just decided to go ahead and cut this one out of foam board straight away, just because it'll be easier to test fit if it's not paper. Paper's really bendy, we'll just kind of flop around, so it'd be better to do a test fit with it in foam board. And also I've realized that I need to work out where the position for the slots for these two tabs. So this will fit into the car with a big kind of slot, one in each side, one here, one over on the side of the car. So I need to work out the exact position of those and cut those out, and then I can properly fit that in the car. Also, I can see already that I might need to make a little bit of a tweak to this one. This top part, especially through here, is really quite small. It just kind of feels a little bit too weak. So I might need to just beef up these two corner sections a little bit and maybe make this a little bit wider so it's a bit stronger. But yeah, I don't know, maybe I'll do a test fit first before I make any changes to this, because I'm sure there'll be other tweaks to the shape and the size of this anyway. So yeah, I'll cut those slots and then I can fit it. All right, good. So it's a little bit too hard to remove these pieces from the car to cut the slots into them. So I left them where they were, and I just printed out a guide from my plans file, set that in place in exactly the right spot, carefully and accurately marked where the slot should be, and then just cut them out with them in place. So now I've got a slot on that side and on this side as well for this to sit into. So let's do the first test fit and see if it fits in place. Okay, good. So that looks like it fits in place well. Sizing looks good, fits into the slots that I've made perfectly. So I guess the next thing to do is to fit these kind of roof bits back in and see how it kind of lines up at that top junction point. So it's not too bad, but if you look around from this side here, you can see that this slot that I've built to join into this piece here, it's actually just sitting a little bit too low and a little bit too far kind of that way. So I have to make some tweaks to this part in my Illustrator file and print a new version. It's pretty close, but it's not quite there. And yeah, as I said before, I'll probably make this part a bit thicker to make it a bit stronger as well. Yeah, so here's a new version of this part. Basically, I jumped into Illustrator and made a few tweaks to kind of the size and the position and shape and profile of these parts right here mainly. So yeah, let's take the old previous version out of the car and see if this one fits any better. Nice, so this new version is much better. It's looking pretty spot on, I think. If you look at it from around here, you can see that that top corner on both sides aligns with the slot that I put in there just perfectly now. Awesome. And I made this guy just a little bit thicker as well, so it's like just stronger than it was before. So yeah, that's good. Happy with that. All right, so the next thing I want to design is basically sort of have like a bunch of like cross brace pieces like this that run down the roof at certain intervals. So maybe like 3 or 4 here and then a couple towards the back of the roof. And what that will do is it'll give the roof strength, and it will set the curvature of the roof like this way. And then it will give me like a base that I'll then be able to glue the outer roof panel to. So I guess that means that I need to design how these will attach to each of the roof pillar parts like this. There'll need to be some kind of intermediary piece. There's no real practical way that I can sort of, I don't really want to cut slots into this and have them slot in like this piece, just because it will like kind of weaken this piece here. So there'll probably need to be some intermediary piece between these two that will connect them all together. So, but yeah, rather than just draw those straight up in Illustrator, might need to prototype them first, so just do some rough kind of mock-ups, some rough prototypes for how those parts might work, and yeah, develop it from there. So let's get started on that. All right, so what I just did was I printed this piece out from my Illustrator file, and then over the top of that, I just really roughly, just with a pencil, kind of sketched what I thought this new part should look like. And then I cut that out of paper, so I've got this rough prototype piece here. And now if I just roughly kind of sit that in place where I think it will eventually be glued when I make the final part, it'll sit there something like that. And then these tabs here will provide little like support platforms for the cross braces that will get glued across the roof. And I'm thinking I'll build in one long tab down the front of the A-pillar like this, so this will be on both sides. And then I can glue the windscreen structure to that. So basically this is all just underlying structure that you won't even see, but I need to start building kind of an interface between this foam board structure and the kind of the outer parts like the windscreen and the roof skin, etc. So these parts that I'll start building out of cardboard will provide that kind of interface structure between the two. Yes, just to try and explain this one a little bit more, I basically just temporarily stuck this piece to the roofline part here, and you can imagine a series of cross brace pieces like this getting glued, one to each of the locations where I'll build those tabs in, like that. So you can see that this makes a neat way to join these parts to these parts. Yeah, so I think that's going to work. I'll get into Illustrator now, start drawing up the first kind of iteration or the first cut of this piece here, and then I can cut that out of the thick black poster board or cardboard that I'm thinking I'm going to make this part out of. And yeah, we'll do a first test fit of the actual part. cool. So that's the first cut of that part drawn up. And yeah, as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to be cutting this one out of this stuff here, which is 1000 GSM black poster board. This is made by Quill as well, same as the foam board. But yeah, just because it's going to be attached to the inside of this piece here, and I want it to be kind of thin, and it has some tabs that fold, and yeah, I just need it to be like thinner than the foam board and be foldable, as I say. So I'll do a test cut out of this. I won't sort of do a test cut out of paper first. I want to go straight to the board, and we'll see how it fits. Let's do it. So there's the part all cut out and with the tabs folded up. So yeah, let's hold it up to the car and see how it looks. So this is looking super good. Like that's really, really good for a first cut of a part. I think it's pretty much, it's almost perfect, except for this bottom edge needs to be cut down. It just needs to be made slightly shorter, because it's not quite sitting down far enough into this front A-pillar part at the bottom. So if I just make it a bit shorter, it should make all the rest of this kind of top area sit down in place perfectly. Everything else looks really good, and you can see how those tabs fold up and give me a surface to glue those cross brace pieces to. So that's looking really, really good. Okay, I'll make that small tweak, and I can probably just cut this one down and also modify the plan file to be the same, and yeah, and then I could almost glue it on. Good. So in Illustrator, I just made a few very, very minor little kind of tweaks and changes just to make these parts perfect, and I cut two of them. So like one is flipped because that will be on the other side of the car. So now these two parts are ready to be glued to the inside of these pieces. So yeah, now I'll take these two parts off the car, put some glue on one side, some PVA glue, and glue the two pieces together. I'll just weigh them down with some books or something while they dry to make sure they dry nice and flat. So yeah, I'll do that. All right, it's the next day, and those parts that I glued up yesterday, they should all be dry, so let's get the books off, fold up the tabs, and put them back on the car and see how they look. Yep, so I'm happy with those parts. Awesome. Oh, one thing I meant to say was this B-pillar part that I made previously that was sitting down in there. I think I'll change that. I'll modify it so that it doesn't go all the way across the top like that. Basically, it doesn't really need to because I'm about to make and fit all these kind of cross brace pieces like this down the roof. So this one doesn't need to have that beast that goes across the top. I'll just cut it and make it two separate pieces. So one half that goes down the side of the car and the other half that goes down that other side of the car. I'll do that later anyway. What I'm going to do now is just, as I say, make these kind of cross brace pieces that will just sit and glue onto each of the tabs. And because I don't have my Illustrator file kind of mocked up to show you the exact positions of these roof pieces like this, like they're just two-dimensional parts basically in my plans file. What I'll do to get the sizes of each of these is just measure directly off my build. So it should be pretty straightforward. I'll just measure the width of each one, draw them up in Illustrator, cut them out, and then I can glue them in place. Should be easy. Good, so I've just done a bunch of work. You saw me draw up and cut out and glue on these top roof brace pieces. So yeah, they're just simply glued in place with PVA glue. And I used some little kind of bulldog clip things to kind of hold them in place while they dry so they didn't move around at all. Although actually that might not have been such a good idea because you can see that it's actually kind of like compressed and kind of like dented the foam board at the kind of the front edges there where I clipped them. Yeah, so that's not so good. I probably won't do that again. But yeah, otherwise they're all good. The size of them is good. Fitment is all really, really nice. And I also just made a bunch of tweaks to these B-pillar parts as I mentioned earlier. So now there's like one separate piece that goes on the side and another separate piece that goes down on the opposite side, rather than it being one piece that was connected across the top like before. So yeah, that's all looking really, really good. Starting to build up a bit of a pile of seconds parts now. They're all like the previous versions of parts that I've cut and then subsequently designed new parts that are better fit, better design. So yeah, I'll keep the old ones, make a bit of a pile. That's a wrap for this video. Thank you very much for watching. Made really good progress on the structure of the roof. So yeah, I think my next job is to start building more pieces which will attach to the outside of all the structure work, and onto those pieces I can then start to design and build and attach all the outer body panels. So that'll be exciting when I get to that stage. So yeah, stick around, watch next week's video to see how I get on, and yeah, I'll see you then.